Hello, my dear friends, comrades, brothers, and sisters in arms. My name is still Amelia, and
I'm back!
With our second episode of the most intriguing military battles. I cannot thank you enough for all your comments, both positive and negative, since the former inflate my ego while the latter force me to get better. Also, much love to Parker and Kim Char at Posy Studios for making this channel possible and working with me day and night. Almost
for
free. Without them, this video would never have seen the light of day. Well, I know what you're thinking, so let's get it started. Let's sink our hopefully cavity-free teeth into the juicy meat of history. Or tofu of history, I guess, if meat is not your thing. Last time, I promised you guys that
I'll be back.
And today's topic is going to be a surprise. And what a surprise this will be. Okay, so it does have Russia in it, so maybe it's not as much of a surprise as I thought. But you will continue watching and listening.
I have a microphone and you don't.
So you will listen to every word I have to say!
Today, we will attempt to answer perhaps the most important and controversial questions of World War II. Why did Japan never attack the Soviet Union in the most critical point of the war, thus forcing the Russians to fight on two fronts, and almost certainly condemning Stalin to failure, while making the premise of the Man in the High Castle show much less far-fetched? And why did Japan decide instead to attack the US? Well, well-documented skepticism regarding the success of such an attack was prevalent within the highest ranks of Japanese military and government. Perhaps this is an ambitious undertaking, but what a rush.
Somebody stop me!
Well, my fellow military nerds, history buffs, and future dictators, are we ready?
Y'all ready for this?
Curiously, the answers to the questions that I spelled out earlier can be found in one of the most inhospitable parts of the inhabited world, Manchuria and Mongolia, along the river Khalkhin Gol, which is the area where the battle that we will be discussing today took place. So, today, our topic is the Battle of Khalkhin Gol.
Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punks?
Which took place in the summer of 1939. Perhaps the most important thing about today's topic is not the battle itself, but its far-reaching consequences. In fact, the battle itself was a bit anticlimactic, which makes its enormous impact on the remaining course of World War II that much more puzzling. The battle was part of a full-scale, brutal, and undeclared war, and undeniably had its interesting moments. After all, this military endeavor did put the ultimate legend of the 20th century military strategy, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, on the map of history. While the action is intriguing, I would never rank this engagement as being so awesome as to be included in my greatest hits playlist. However, the more I studied it, the more I was blown away by a crazy web of coincidences and consequences that this limited campaign brought about. And yet, it is relatively unknown, especially compared to so many other battles of World War II. So, let me have a couple minutes of your time to give you the usual important background information, so you will never have a reason to say
Things that could have been brought to my attention.
Yesterday!
Alrighty then. Going way back, the Japanese defeated the Russians in 1904. Because of this, Japan decided to become a massive naval power.
Phenomenal cosmic power!
And by 1934, it accomplished its goal by building the third most powerful fleet, coming in behind Great Britain and the USA. As Japan prepared for war, its military and ruling establishment had developed two major and slightly contradictory directions to channel their expansionist goals, which would allow them to access much-needed natural resources, especially oil. The first option was to move up north, towards Mongolia and the Soviet Union. The second one was to move down south, toward the oil-rich Dutch East Indies. This southern direction was favored by the Navy, which clearly recognized that they would have played the most important role in the upcoming conflict. The Army favored a northern expansion, where they would have played a vital role, pushing the Navy guys into the background of history.
We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight.
Predictably, the Japanese Navy were of the opinion that the Army boys were
Old school.
and thought that attacking Russia would bring Japan no military honor, as they were still reliving their glory days of the victorious Russian campaign from 30 years ago. The main force behind the northern expansion inside the Japanese armed forces was the Kwantung Army, which enjoyed an unprecedented degree of independence from the central command.
I don't want no partner, I don't need no partner, and I ain't gonna never have no partner.
As the sole defender of the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo, the commanders of the Kwantung Army could do almost as they pleased.
I'm the president, I'm the emperor, I'm the king.
And they were very pleased to attack yet another puppet state, the People's Republic of Mongolia, who were the faithful servant of the Soviet Union.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
Curiously, long before the start of the conflict, the Kwantung Army loved to irritate their Mongolian and sometimes even Russian counterparts by employing a highly creative, threatening, and not politically correct strategy of frequently urinating in unison in the direction of their opponents.
I gotta pay.
On May 18th of 1939, a group of slightly confused Mongolian cavalry accidentally rode into the zone between the Mongolian river of Khalkhin Gol and the village of Nomonhan, the area that the Japanese considered theirs.
This land is your land. This land is my land.
Drawing their samurai swords, the Japanese army bravely scared the Mongolian horses, which in turn quickly carried their riders back into Mongolian territory. Having shared this horrifying experience with their other Mongolian comrades, the brave descendants of Genghis Khan decided to teach the Japanese a lesson. And after exclaiming,
We are not going to attack, right? No!
they swiftly attacked their opponents. As the conflict quickly escalated into a full-blown war, the Soviet 57th Division, which was stationed nearby, intervened on the Mongolian side. Thus, the conflict became a battle between the Soviet Union and Japan. By all standards, the conflict remained very localized, and all the military actions were conducted far from civilization. Besides the occasional experiments in the Spanish Civil War, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol demonstrated the awesome power of the coordinated attack of tanks and armored units, infantry, and air power. During this conflict, the still relatively inexperienced Komkor Zhukov had tested his encirclement approach, which he perfected and utilized on a much grander scale during the course of World War II. Humbug, you may say. Well, maybe not you, but my Uncle Scrooge certainly would.
Humbug.
What was so unique about a strategy of encirclement? That's been done so many times before. And to that, I say that you, and my dear Uncle Scrooge, are correct. However, the significance of Zhukov's strategy of encirclement was based upon a rapid advancement of motorized units, mostly tanks, towards enemy flanks, utilizing the speed and high degree of off-roadiness of these units. Off-roadiness? Is that even a word? Well, it is now. Move over, Mr. Webster. There's a new sheriff in town, and her name is me. Nah, no one can say it better than Dwight Schrute.
There's a new sheriff here in these offices, and his name is me.
Zhukov was a student of one of my favorite German generals, Heinz Wilhelm Guderian, who was an early pioneer and advocate of the Blitzkrieg approach. By the way, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, is a method of warfare where highly mobile motorized forces, such as tanks, with considerable air support, deliver an impactful military and psychological blow to the enemy, designed to break through enemy lines. He also played a central role in developing and promoting the Panzer Division concept. Zhukov did add his own twist of combining motorized units with the heavy use of air support in order to quickly encircle the enemy, as compared to the Guderian concept of deep penetration of enemy lines, establishing sort of a land bridgehead and continuing to move forward. Zhukov also had ample opportunities to experiment with the use of Air Force, an area where he had little experience. Thanks to the great assistance of another Red Army commander, Yakov Smushkevich, who was commanding Air Force units at Khalkhin Gol. Yakov was an experienced air support master and a veteran of the Spanish Civil War, who was the inspiration behind Zhukov's subsequent and unwavering belief in the unbeatable power of massive motorized attacks, supported by an equally massive air assault. As a side note, on our recent family trip to Spain, I encountered a number of stories of an American fighter pilot, the brave and selfless General Douglas, who, incidentally, became a friend of none other than Ernest Hemingway. I was rather shocked to find out later that this brave American fighter pilot was, after all, the same old Yakov Smushkevich. His fluency in several foreign languages and hobnobbiness. That's right, hobnobbiness is also a word in your face, Mr. Webster. And friendliness with several international celebrities were not well received by the paranoid Soviet police state. And shortly after the start of World War II, Smushkevich was arrested on trumped-up charges and executed by the very state he worked so hard to defend. During the Battle of Khalkhin Gol, Zhukov showed his ruthless side.
I haven't killed anyone in years.
Which became painfully evident during the course of World War II, sending thousands and later hundreds of thousands of men to die, hardly attempting to minimize human losses.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
In reality, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol should be instead called a Khalkhin Gol campaign, since it was actually a collection of several battles of various significance. Beginning in May, with a small border confrontation, the conflict progressed in June and July to involve the Japanese Imperial Army, which was initially reluctant to support the semi-renegade actions of the Kwanchun Army commanders, but finally decided that a showcase victory over the Soviet forces is exactly what the doctor ordered. By August, the conflict entered into its final phase with a massive and ultimately successful Soviet counterattack. On the surface, the conflict over the stretch of land that no one really wanted had appeared almost out of nowhere, holding no real strategic and military advantage to either side. Yet, for Stalin, who was hoping to push Western democracies into an all-out war with Hitler, this small theater of war, far, far away from Moscow,
Far away,
had become extremely important. Stalin needed to defeat Japan to demonstrate to Hitler that Russia is too powerful to have as an enemy on his eastern border, and it would be so much better if Germany has the Soviet Union as a neutral but sympathetic neighbor. To this end, Stalin was actively seeking an opportunity to sign a peace treaty with Germany, and, if the ghost of Karl Marx smiled upon him, to agree with Hitler on the new sphere of influence in the areas that were of interest to both countries, such as Poland and the Baltic states. As the war started poorly for the Soviet Union, Stalin pulled out all the stops, sending to Mongolia endless but poorly trained reinforcements, tanks, and airplanes. The problem was that Stalin lacked qualified commanders on all levels, since the vast majority were killed during the Great Purges of 1937 to 1938. Reluctantly, Stalin had to consider that it may be a good idea to keep at least some of his commanders alive.
You saved my life, and in return I'll spare yours.
And sent a young division commander, or Comcorps, Georgy Zhukov, to sunny Mongolia.
What's your sole purpose in this army?
To do whatever you tell me, drill sergeant?
Most Red Army generals, who actually had the leadership experience from the days of the Russian Civil War, were of the old military stock, and were marked for death during the purges. Commanders who survived, like Zhukov, were of humble origin. Typically, they had limited or no combat experience, unless they had the privilege to fight against General Franco during the Spanish Civil War on the Republican side. Eventually, due to the ever-swelling reinforcements, as well as the creative use of Air Force in conjunction with tanks and infantry, while utilizing his classic encirclement maneuver. Zhukov had been able to defeat the Japanese forces. On September 15th, Soviet and Japanese commanders signed an armistice agreement. Curiously, only 3 days after Zhukov's offensive of August 20th, Soviet victory was made a certainty, and Vyacheslav Molotov and German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop signed an agreement in Moscow, which came to be known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Agreement. The agreement itself professed the eternal love
All you need is love. John Lennon, smart man, shot in the back, very sad.
as well as a cooperation between the Soviet Union and Germany. While this pleased Comrade Yosef Vissarionovich Zhugashvili,
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Stalin's real name, the secret supplement to this agreement was what made him especially happy. Führer was content as well, as he got half of Poland as his sphere of influence, while the Soviet Union got the Baltic republics as well as the eastern half of Poland. The eternal love, as promised by Hitler. Predictably, did not last long, as he suspected, and not without good reason, that Stalin was simply playing for time and would stab Hitler in the back
For stabbing me in the back!
at the moment of his greatest vulnerability.
You're a monster, Zug. I know.
Less than 20 months later, on June 22nd of 1941, Germany attacked the Soviet Union and enjoyed an unprecedented initial success, as the very same weakness of the Red Army seen at Khalkhin Gol was evident on a much greater scale during the opening months of the Great Patriotic War. Despite the fact that the majority of the Soviet army did not take the lessons of Khalkhin Gol to heart, the 4 months of intense military actions in Mongolia allowed Zhukov to create a robust and experienced army, which was left to guard the eastern border of the Soviet Union in case Japan decided to get cute and attack Russia again. This force, stationed in Siberia, grew into a well-supplied and well-organized fighting machine, consisting of 117 divisions and more than 400 tanks, receiving a collective Russian name of Speedy, or the Siberians. Once it became clear that Japan, led by their Navy initiatives, decided to confront the U.S. Pacific Fleet by pursuing the southern expansion plan from earlier,
Are you crazy? Or just plain stupid?
these fresh and battle-tested Siberian troops were quickly transferred to the Western Front, and not a moment too soon, as the Soviet Union was fighting perhaps the most critical battle for survival, the Battle of Moscow. There is no doubt that the arrival of these experienced, well-equipped and trained units in December, which occurred practically days after Japan committed itself to a duel with the United States by attacking Pearl Harbor, was a decisive factor in the Battle of Moscow, possibly saving the entire Soviet capital and the country. As a result, a small border conflict between two puppet states ended up pushing Japan into southern expansion, bringing the US into the war and depriving Hitler from his much-needed ally in the east, who could have prevented the critical transfer of Siberian troops that saved Moscow. During the military actions at Khalkhin Gol, the effective use of air power in conjunction with tanks and infantry by the Soviet commanders left a deep impression on their Japanese counterparts. With the Kwantung Army in disgrace,
My own mama ashamed of me. She tell everybody I'm a drug dealer.
those in Japan who advocated affiliating the Air Force with the Navy prevailed. Among the most vocal proponents of this merger was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant commander who devised the plan of attack on Pearl Harbor, utilizing air power as the most effective naval weapon. After the war, one of the leaders of the Kwantung Army published his letter to the German High Command. The letter was written in 1941 in response to Germany's persistent demands for Japan to attack the Soviet Union on the eastern border, thus ensuring the success of the German Blitzkrieg. The response to these demands from the Japanese general is as telling as it was philosophical. We went to primary school with Russians on Lake Khusan, another small victory for the Red Army. We received our high school education at Khalkhin Gol. At this point, we see no benefit from any further education. Well, this is the story of possibly the most under-demysticated
What's under the meat?
conflict of the 20th century. I hope you enjoyed it and will click all sorts of buttons on your screen. So we get all warm and fuzzy and rush to produce the next episode of the most intriguing military battles.